Hello. Interesting. It appears that you may have been all muted. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Excellent. We'll get started in just a second. Make sure nobody else is going to show up. With our riveting turnout of 5 people. Excellent. Have you guys been doing Zoom for other classes?
Yep.
How has the turnout been for those?
Pretty good, I think.
More than 5?
Yeah.
Ah, excellent. I see that my class has been deemed non-essential.
I guess so.
Not the one with Smith. There were 3.
All right.
Yeah, I did not dismiss. I felt like, I don't know.
So is it just like Harkeys that most people show up to?
And Carl's.
That makes sense.
There was
Not
a
that
lot.
many people did the morning one though, with Carl's.
Yeah, that's fair.
I
think a lot
mean,
of
if
people
you
ask that.
chose to do it, you had to do it.
Oh, so it was mandatory for them?
For some people who chose to at the beginning.
I think you're essential, Mr. Mace.
I appreciate that, Dallas.
No problem.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get going. Try and get through this pretty quick so you guys can get on out of here. So this week, everything you guys looked at was dealing with imperialism in Asia, specifically like India, Palestine, and the Ottoman Empire. So I just really quickly want to go over, again, how these kind of connect back to those motives that we've talked about and make sure everyone kind of gets how this continues to cause problems, because that's kind of the major theme for this, what has now become a full unit, the idea that these motives for imperialism consistently cause problems for everybody involved, including the Europeans. So we'll talk about India and Egypt first, move on to the Ottoman Empire, and then I'll give you guys just kind of an overview of what we're going to do next week, especially since it looks probable that this is how we're going to do things for the rest of the year. So with that documentary that you guys watched, can I give you a broad overview of the British in India, North Africa, and then like including Egypt and Palestine? Just kind of linking them back to those motives. You should hopefully by now be starting to see a pattern, but I also just want to kind of clearly lay it out with how imperialism tends to work, which is that you tend to see the economic one be one of the driving motivations, which is like you look at the British in India. India had a large population, offers them cheap labor and lots of people to sell their items that they're making out of factories to. On top of that, they also have lots of natural resources, which means that that's a lot of stuff that Britain can acquire and export back to their tiny island, which at this point in world history is kind of running out of supplies. And all that ends up resulting in an emphasis on money above all else. It's pretty much the exact same as what we saw happen with the Boers last week, where the Boers had gold and diamonds, the British wanted it, and that was really all that they cared about. From there, you also see a lot of the same problems stem from the way that the British tend to govern. So the idea that, like we talked about in Africa, Belgium, Germany, all these places wanted to control the areas, but they lacked the people to do so because a lot of the territory they're conquering is a lot bigger than them. India was no different. In the documentary, you should have hopefully picked up on the fact that there were lots of Indians and very few British, which is a problem, right? Like when you have 600,000 British and then there's 2 million Indians, you can't really easily control them. And so their solution is that method of indirect rule that we talked about, where the local government is usually in charge, and then they tend to favor some ethnic group and put them above the rest. And then that inevitably causes problems. You over and over again see inequality. In the documentary, they talked about the first Indian War for Independence, and this is where you see that sort of ethnic favoritism causing problems, like how in Africa, Chad and Darfur hate each other, or the Hutus and the Tutsis hated each other. You see the Sikhs, a specific group, ethnic group within India, remain loyal to the British during that rebellion. And then after the fact, the British favor them above everybody else, and they like pick tons of Sikh people to join the military and favor them over the local Indians, which causes resentment to where even today there can at times be tensions with the Sikhs due to that favoritism. And then it all kind of encapsulates in that final issue where once there's a problem and the people of India get angry enough, just like the people of Africa, they decide to rebel. And the British solution is violence supported by technology. With the Africans and the Boers, they would burn entire villages. And it's basically the same thing that happened with India, as you should have hopefully picked up on, is that once the rebellion is put down because the British have superior technology, they do so in very aggressive ways, where they go around and they kill hundreds of thousands of people. British soldiers engage in rape, in burning of villages, like it's a bad time. And it solidifies this pattern that is basically the 5 steps that you see in that slide, where a European country wants a territory for economic reasons. They use their superior technology to conquer that territory. They lack the ability to directly control it, so they appoint a bunch of local rulers. They tend to favor one ethnic group, which causes tension. They overwork the people, which creates additional tension. And then once people become unhappy with local rule, they rebel, and everybody is harmed. And it's generally just a horrible time for all parties involved. So any kind of questions about why this pattern keeps happening over and over again?
No.
I appreciate the feedback, Destiny. Good. Yeah. So that, like, it's the same thing over and over again. This is very characteristic of the entire unit. And to a degree, you even kind of see that in the Middle East with the Ottoman Empire, but it's only slightly different there, where, as you guys should have read, the Ottomans were a world power, but they lack some of those key differences that Europe had, to where they ultimately kind of fall on the wayside like a lot of the other places. As you read through, the key takeaways that I wanted you to come up with were that, again, economics and money are the driving factor behind the issues in the Ottoman Empire, namely the fact that Russia wanted new trade routes in the seas that the Ottoman Empire controlled, specifically the Crimea area. That results in war. And then again, you see the Europeans stepping in and making decisions rather than the Ottomans because of that superior technology. In particular, what I wanted to emphasize from the reading was the fact that even though the Ottomans won against the Russians, it's still, again, an indicator of how the Europeans' advantage continues to allow them to just kind of bully everybody around them, where the Ottomans would not have won had France and Britain not stepped in on the side of the Ottomans to protect their own economic interests. And of course, this should hopefully also lead to the question, like, why were the Ottomans so unable to expand? And that deals with a lot of the stuff that you guys had at the start of your reading, which was primarily the fact that they lacked the military and the technology to compete. They tried to reform. You should have read about the Sultan Suleiman, who tried to, but was then overthrown because they just didn't, the people didn't like it. They didn't agree with it. And that's, again, just this characterization of this time period is a period of cultural upheaval. You have people who are behind the times, and either they don't get with the times fast enough and they're run over by the Europeans, or when people try to change, they do so poorly, and then there is rebellion and strife that stems from that. And really, the only people that super benefit are the British, and to a small degree, the Germans. But beyond that, for the most part, it's just these cycles of oppression and inequality due to the greedy nature of Europeans during this time period. So, any questions over any of that? The crickets are reassuring.
No.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well then, all I'd really like to drive home with that is, again, keep in mind the 5 steps. I'll send these out again, but keep those in mind, and you can really substitute British with Europeans and look for that as we get towards the end of this unit, because we're pretty much there. And the way it's going to break down going forward is next week, we're going to finish talking about Asia. We'll look at China. On Tuesday, we'll talk about the Opium Wars. You guys had videos about that before, but they weren't required to watch. This time around, they will be. So if you already did that, it'll be kind of a nice review. If you didn't, you'll just need to make sure that you watch them. On Wednesday, we'll talk about something called the Boxer Rebellion, which is just another attempt by a different group to try and rise up against Europe. And again, getting smacked down, continuing this cyclical pattern. Thursday, we'll talk about why imperialism as a whole kind of comes to a conclusion. We'll do another quick review, and then the following week, the majority of the week will be for you guys to do writing. I'm going to ask you to do a essay about the effects of imperialism and kind of the problems with how we engaged with it, and you'll have the whole week to work on that. But we'll talk about that later, because that's many weeks from now. But just kind of driving home the point that we are coming to an end. And so it's very important that you start noticing these themes, being able to pick up on this idea of what motives are most important, which ones are less important. So with that, like I said, it was a pretty short day because it was a short week. Do you guys have any questions about anything else that we've covered? Any previous assignments, practical stuff like that?
No.
All right. Well, then that is all. I appreciate you showing up for like 10 minutes or so. Like I said, it's not a super long one for this week. If you want physical copies of stuff, there'll be some at the school on Monday for the next 2 weeks. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.